It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Mike Harbour.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. My name is Paul Gustafson, and joining me today is my co-host, Mike Harbour. Hey, Mike. How you doing?
Paul, man, I'm doing good. How about yourself, my friend?
I'm doing great. I can't believe it. You know, here we are in the middle of summer, moving pretty quick through summer, and before we know it, it's going to be fall. We're going to see, with COVID-19, we're not sure what's going to happen in the world of sports, but it could be fun, right? I mean, we could get some football. We know that hockey started recently, and basketball is doing their thing, and baseball is trying to do their thing. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here, huh?
Yeah, I'm excited. In August, so it's as we record, it's August the 2nd. And in Arkansas, typically August the 2nd, it's like standing on the surface of the sun. That's how hot it is. This morning, Paul, 66 degrees. It's incredible. It's like a fall morning. So I know it won't last long here in a couple of weeks, but it does get you ready for the fall football season when you have weather like that. So yeah, I'm super excited about the fall coming up. Hopefully we'll be able to have those sports for sure.
Yeah. Well, we're excited about today, and we're not talking about sports, but we are talking about culture, and culture is a big part of sports. And joining us today, we have Diane Kane and Rick Morris. And we've asked them to join us again as we continue to mastermind on what it means to break average. What does it take to break average? And we believe that's the common mission of leaders.
Yeah, Paul, this is fun, right? Breaking average, talking about leaders who break average. We started podcasting together a couple of years ago under the name the Transformational Leader Podcast as part of the John Maxwell team. But we wanted to do something different. Bring different leaders onto the platform, discuss what breaking average is. And breaking average is really the mark of a transformational leader. Today, we're going to talk about culture, and we're going to talk with a guy. We're going to hear from a guy that you interviewed recently, Paul, Mark Miller, who has been a part of the Chick-Fil-A organization for years and really helped create the culture that we know of Chick-Fil-A.
Yeah, it was so great just to sit down with Mark. And if if you just Google culture, you will probably find Chick-fil-A images up, right? I mean, we think of that. If you're anywhere near a Chick-fil-A, and I know some of our listeners probably have never even experienced a Chick-fil-A. You should. And what you'll experience isn't just necessarily good food. Yes, they have good food, but you also have great culture. And so the man you're about to hear is passionate about leadership. He's passionate about culture. His name is Mark Miller. And he's got a slew of books. I'm not going to name all of them, but a few of them that I really like. In fact, I like them all. But The Secret, that's a fantastic book. The Secret of Teams, fantastic book. The Heart of Leadership, Chess is Not Checkers. And then his most recent one, Win Every Day. You've got to grab this book. It's fantastic.
I haven't seen that one yet, Paul, but I do love Mark's writing. I've read a few of his books. I'm looking forward to picking that one up as well. Hey, we've got Diane Kane and Rick Morris joining us. Hey, Diane, tell us where you're at today.
Hey, good morning. Sitting here in, semi-sunny Rhode Island. It's a little warmer here than it is for you. Not unusual here, but
it's interesting how we in the deep South are colder than our northerners up there, right?
Did you have to put your sweatshirt on this morning?
I may have to. It was chilly sitting out on the back patio this morning, but it's awesome. Good to have you with us today, Dan. Looking forward to hearing more from you. And then we've got our friend Rick Morris down in the deep South, Alabama. Rick, how are you, my friend?
Doing well. Evidently, electricity still works. We still got plumbing here. I know you like to make fun of Alabama, but everything's still working at the moment, and we're happy to be here.
Well, I'm sure as we get into the concept of culture, we'll talk a lot about the Alabama culture and how not to be as we dig deeper into this. But thanks for joining us today. Let's dive into our conversation that Paul Gustafson recently had with Mark Miller. Let's listen in, eavesdrop a little bit on some of these ideas around culture. Here we go.
All right. Hey, I am so excited to be here with Mark Miller. Mark is somebody I met a few years ago. We've had a couple conversations over Life's Path, focused on leadership, focused on helping others. And he's written some amazing books over the last few years. I remember reading Heart of Leadership, and I was just taken back by that book in terms of what's just the intent and the focus of that. And he's continued to serve up some books that have been phenomenal. And his latest book is Win Every Day: Proven Practices for Extraordinary Results. Mark, it is so good to be with you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Sheltered in place, but doing great. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.
Yeah, the sheltered in place, that's kind of like the new normal for all of us, isn't it? So it's been a pivot. And so how are things? First, let's kind of talk about that just for a second. How have you guys sheltered in place? And certainly I have seen the impact that Chick-fil-A, for example, has been making despite what's happening. But tell us a little bit more about that perspective, your perspective.
Well, our operators and team members are doing heroic work serving our customers. Those of us sheltering in place are the support center staff. We have not been traveling to restaurants. I was on a call this morning with 45 operators where I'm doing that, different groups of operators around the country from time to time, just to encourage them and listen to them. I was on a listening session this week with another group of operators. So we're trying to leverage technology like everyone else and figure out, what do we do in this season? We obviously have begun to think about what a new normal might look like, but I don't think anyone knows at this point. So we're just thankful that we've been investing in infrastructure, things such as our drive-through. We've been working on that for several years. And right now, that's how we're primarily serving our customers. And so thankful for the opportunity to keep the doors open.
Yeah, and let me just make a comment on that. The way that you guys have been serving your customers has been phenomenal. I have seen that being emulated by other businesses, not just the food business. And really, we're learning from the Chick-fil-A model. In fact, we, in our own business, Mark, I got to tell you this, we had usually we have an event every year called Imagineering Day. And in fact, a few years ago, our theme for Imagineering Day was it's all in the serve. And we use the acrostic serve, right? See the future, embody the values, reinvent continuously, value results and relationships, and engage and equip others. We use that theme. Thank you for allowing us to do that. But we had we were supposed to have Imagineering this year, and we didn't because of COVID-19. So we had all these amazing T-shirts about pursuing the dream. And we thought, okay, we got to get the shirts out. So we said, wait a minute, how do we do this? Oh, Chick-fil-A, let's just try their style. So we did a drive-up T-shirt distribution and followed really the Chick-fil-A model to do that. So,
love it.
Yeah,
Love it.
It's good.
I hope you gave everyone a my pleasure as they pulled away.
You know what? There was some of that going on, but
good.
We could have done better.
Okay.
We can always improve.
We can always do better.
Yeah, that's good. So I just want to take a minute just to kind of get for folks to get to know you a little bit further. As you know, we're focused on this idea of breaking average for our podcast for season 2, and we believe that that's what we're called to do. So, Mark, when you think of breaking average, what comes to mind for you in your own life, and why is breaking average important?
Well, I want to thank you and your team for challenging all of us to continue to raise the bar. As I think about that question, I've got to go back really more than 40 years. I've been on corporate staff now more than 40 years. I was the 16th corporate employee and started in the warehouse in the mailroom. And Dan Cathy challenged me early on. It was probably within my first year with this idea that your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead.
Wow.
And I kind of bought that hook, line, and sinker. Now, it was a choice. It was a conscious choice because if you're familiar with Strength Finder, as I've told this story to others, they said, well, you're probably a learner. That's probably natural and easy for you. And I said, I don't think learner is in my top 20. Yeah. And they said, well, you act like a learner. And I said, well, thanks. I made a decision that I would pursue learning, right? If in fact, Dan was correct, that your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead, I'm going to commit to lifelong learning.
Yeah.
And so there are probably many areas in my life where I'm not breaking average yet. My golf game would be one of them, but I'm trying to get better, and I'm trying to grow, because I think the more we grow, the better we can serve. And so that's my motivation. And it was probably a defining moment in my career when I said, okay, if this is how the world works. He said, you want more opportunity, you want more influence, you want more impact, you got to keep growing.
That's so powerful. I love that statement. And you said it so well. And that's you gave me a visual in terms of what happened for you 40 years ago. And that remark, it's just amazing what a few words can do to really trigger and set in motion a whole new path for us. And you said, our capacity to grow dictates our capacity to lead. I love that. So this
now,
is
let me quickly add to that. As I've shared that with some people, it's actually been misinterpreted, and I've had literally someone say, "So you're telling me if I grow, I'll be promoted?" And I said, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not." I said, "Your capacity to grow determines your capacity to lead. We control our readiness. The organization controls our opportunity."
Yeah. Wow. That's
But if you're not ready, you're not going to get the opportunity. But there's no guarantee. Growth is not a guaranteed path to the corner office. But the absence of growth can keep you from that corner office. I guess we don't have corner offices anymore. We don't even have offices anymore, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
We're all outside just serving now with COVID-19. That's good.
That's
I
right.
love it. I love it. So this book right here really kind of stretches on that when we think about it. Win every day. And you say that there's 4 moves that we can make, right? For a high performance organization, if they're going to edge into that capacity where they could go, there are 4 moves that they make, right? So can you share those 4 moves? What are they?
Yeah, and I think just a word of backstory. You know the backstory on this. This grew out of some work that we started in 2010. This was about a 5-year journey to figure out what do all high-performance organizations have in common. Because we wanted to help Chick-Fil-A restaurants and honestly leaders around the world take their organizations to the next level. And we discovered there were 4 things. We call them the 4 moves of a high-performance organization. They bet on leadership. We can't find a high-performance organization on the planet that's not well-led, that thinks intentionally, strategically, proactively about developing current leaders and future leaders. Just high-performance organizations are well-led. They act as one, which means they're aligned. There's tremendous, this may be a blinding flash to the obvious, but there's tremendous power when people are aligned. They win the heart, which is really not a new idea. It's about engagement. We've been talking about engagement for 20 years. Marcus Buckingham was probably still in grade school when we started talking about engagement. He kind of popularized it. We're glad he did. We think it's hugely important, because if your people don't care, which is our working definition of engagement, is really how much people care.
Yeah.
They're highly engaged. They care a lot. If they're not engaged at all, they care very little, could care less. Yeah. And assuming that you win the heart, that you've created a culture and an environment where people care, you're positioned to excel at execution, which is the hallmark of all great organizations. At the end of the day, greatness hinges on execution. The leadership, alignment, and engagement are to position you so that you can execute.
Yeah, so there is something about the sequence there, guys. So you can't excel at execution until you go through that process, right, Mark? Where, you have to bet on leadership. You need to come together. This idea of culture, somewhere I read that the word culture is Latin for the word care, which I think is pretty powerful. And then you have to win the heart. So pretty powerful stuff. So in Win Every Day, you share some incredible principles for breaking average, identifying really 3 fundamentals that I think each of us should ascribe to do. So what does it mean to pursue mastery? You talk about that as one of the fundamentals. What does it mean to pursue mastery?
All right, I'm going to give one word of context and I'll answer your question, because I didn't say this clearly. After we identified what all high-performance organizations do, we've come back and created resources to support each of those moves. Win Every Day is the resource to help organizations excel at execution. So I wanted to be sure and connect that dot
Yes.
for your listeners. Sorry, I didn't say that earlier.
Yeah.
And on our journey, we have distilled down what great organizations do to several fundamentals. The first one is to pursue mastery. And this was not surprising once we understood it, but it caught us off guard. We had the privilege of building quite a large team of subject matter experts. And I had a sports psychologist on our team who actually, Milt Louder, he works with Clemson back when Clemson was playing football. I hope they'll play again someday. And we had several really, really smart people on the team, including another sports psychologist. But he shared with us that you can never achieve the level of greatness, the level of performance. You can never get to the rare air of elite performance without individual choice. You can't do it through mandate. You can't do it through edict. You can't really even do it with carrots and sticks. If you're going to become the best in the world at anything, it's because individuals have signed up for the journey.
Yeah.
And so that first fundamental is when we challenge everyone in an organization to pursue mastery. And to summarize that concept, it's about a personal commitment to best effort to do the right thing the right way every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to try. It's not about perfection. This was fascinating to me. And again, we got this from the Clemson program. They said that Dabo would not expect every player to execute their assignment flawlessly on every play. It's like, well, what do you mean? He said, no, that would be an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
Now, it should be the goal. Lofty goals inspire people, but unrealistic expectations demotivate people.
Yeah.
And they said they're building a program to help people pursue lofty goals. The lofty goal of doing the right thing the right way every time. And as we work together, you will more and more often be able to meet that goal. So pursue mastery is about that personal commitment to whatever the task at hand is.
Yeah, and it's so good because when the way you just described it and the way that I got it out of the book, when we talk about pursue mastery, it sets up our mindset for winning every day, right?
Exactly.
Like every day is an opportunity for me to learn something new, to try something new, to make an impact, to add value in a whole new way. I'm going to pursue this. And it really redefines what mastery is. It's not a self licking lollipop. It's not a just for myself gain thing. It's an opportunity for me to step out and help other people. That if I pour into myself, if I learn more for me, then I have more to add to others. And so there's a lot there with pursue mastery, and I like it. And I also thought of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So that top part, right? And we're realizing it's not just from an individual standpoint, it's from the opportunity that we have to fellowship with other people and make that impact. So good. So let's talk about own the numbers. So we talk about pursue mastery, and guys, you got to dive into this book and really understand this is so powerful. And I love the story you tell, Mark, how you weave this with a fable. And it's got some good storylines in it, and it's a lot of fun. And then there's a lot of great insight to boot with it. But let's talk about own the numbers. There's a question in the book that I love, and I just want to ask you. You say how much of own the numbers is about the past, and how much is about the future? And that I just circled that one, outlined it like that is a power question, because truthfully, when we say we measure on average, we're measuring on the past. We're measuring on old numbers. So tell me more. What's own the numbers?
Well, as we did the research for this, we spent time with some amazing organizations, and it was across the board. We spent time with Southwest Airlines, the Navy SEALs, Apple, Starbucks. I mean, all the usual suspects. I already mentioned the Clemson football program, on and on and on and on. Cirque du Soleil, Mayo Clinic. I mean, just people who were exceptional at execution. And we could not escape the fact that measurement was part of every one of those cultures.
Yeah.
But we also saw that it was not just a leadership bias or a leadership focus, but it was a cultural focus. And it really goes back to pursue mastery. If you've made a decision to pursue mastery, it's easier to own the numbers because you want to improve, and the numbers are your primary indicator. Are you improving? Are you growing? Are you getting better? And so own the numbers is about the past, but it's more about the future. It's a reflection of past performance, but it's also the opportunity to learn so that you can create better performance in the future. So we know it's important to have a historical perspective, but we don't want historians. We want history makers.
Yeah.
And if I know how I'm performing, then I'm informed to create whatever interventions are necessary, either systemic interventions, process interventions, or personal changes. And then the numbers actually are an indicator. Have those interventions, have those changes been productive? And are we moving in the right direction? So again, it's still back to the individual. Owning the numbers is something you want everyone to do. That's one thing we really discovered, that some philosophies or strategies around execution are more organizationally based. What we found is the very best organizations, execution is a very personal issue. I have to pursue mastery. You have to pursue mastery. We have to together own the numbers. Like, okay, this is what happened. This is what didn't happen. And what are we going to do to get on the right side of this?
You know, that aligns so much. I read a book called Measure What Matters by John Doerr. I don't know if you read that book.
I have.
And he's, just for everybody else's sake, he was at Intel with, forget the gentleman's name. It'll come to me. He was the CEO of Intel, Andy Groves. And Andy came up with this idea of OKRs, objectives and key results. And what I love about that is, from a leadership standpoint, we may have a strong element in terms of identifying the objectives we're going to hit and what we need to meet. But we also want our teams to own part of that. And this goes down to the individual level, just like you're talking about. And so with the KRs, right, OKRs, objectives and key results, the key results are something that isn't just a leadership thing, but it's really the whole team thing. They buy into what it is that we're trying to achieve. And what's helpful from this, it's not just a tactical play in terms of trying to hit those numbers. It's a strategic look, right? Now they're looking ahead, and I just finished the Bezos books, the Bezos letters by Steve Anderson, and it was another reflection of that, which they also apply to OKRs. And so when I was reading this in your book, I was thinking of John Doerr's concept of measure what matters, and what you just described is so key. If we get the right objectives and we have clarity on what those key results are, and we own those key results, then we're going to pursue mastery, like you talked about, and we're going to own those numbers. They mean something to us, and we're going to see those impact. So I think that it really comes together there for me. So appreciate that. All right. So then there's a third piece, Mark, that is really cool and one of my favorites. I really resonated with this concept of helping others win. And in fact, I alluded to that earlier on Pursue Mastery. But what are some practical ways to help others win? Let's dive into that one now.
Okay. Well, this is where the whole strategy takes a little bit of a turn. As we just said, pursue mastery and own the numbers is actually about me. But all of a sudden, we've moved this strategy to embrace the we. It's like now my role in addition to pursuing mastery and owning the numbers is to help you win. And you feel the same way about me. We've actually had some of our leaders who've put these 3 fundamentals in the job descriptions. It's like, if you're not helping others win, you're not fully executing your responsibilities.
Yeah.
And the practical ways, it surprised us. We had a little app where at the end of every shift, we ask people a few questions. I won't get into all that right now, but the third question was, how did you help someone win today? And we did this in 40 of our pilot restaurants. And in 60 days, I think we had 30,000 examples. And it was the gasoline on the fire for our organization, because probably any number of reasons. I think it's a reflection of the heart of many of our people. Our operators have done a great job in selecting folks who really do enjoy serving. And for many, this may be a blinding flash of the obvious, but it was liberating to tell people to serve your fellow teammates is actually part of your job. Help them win. Yeah. And we weren't particularly prescriptive, but we got all kind of answers. We got answers from, I covered a shift for Sally so she could go home and be with her sick child. We got, I helped Joe unload the truck. I corrected somebody who was new and they didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't know how to do it right. And I said, let me help you win. This is not how we do it. I mean, on and on and on. Even I had one team member that said, I've started listening to other people when orders are placed at their registers. If I'm not busy, I'll get their drinks for them because I'm trying to help them win. And so again, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of examples. And it really has changed the culture. One quick story. I was talking to a young woman. She was probably 17, 18 years old. And she said that this had changed her life. And I'm curious. I'm going, okay, how has this whole win every day thing changed your life? And she said, well, I come to work with a totally different mindset, a totally different attitude. And I said, help me understand. I'd love to know more. And she said, I walk in here every day trying to figure out how I can help my teammates win. Again, just trying to be a good listener. I said, and why would you do that? And she said, have you not heard about our app? And I said, well, I have. And she said, at the end of every shift, they're going to ask me how I help somebody win, and I want to be sure and have an answer. And so she said, it's changed everything. It's changed everything. And so you don't need to hear many of those stories to know that when you basically deputize, even what's a higher bar, when you charge people that part of your job is to help others win, and it's their job to help you win. Particularly when you have people who have said, hey, I'm going to pursue mastery and I'm going to own the numbers, and now I've got 40 or 50 people around me who are helping me win. Like I said, it has been the gasoline on the fire for us. It creates an ethos of community. Used that term earlier. That we know that you've committed to pursue mastery. We know you've committed to own the numbers, and part of my responsibility is to help you do that.
That's so good. I just want to encourage all our listeners with that concept of help others win. It is so powerful. As you listen to this podcast, I want you to think about what opportunities exist in front of you, because there are opportunities every day, maybe every minute, every hour, there's an opportunity to help somebody win. And it could just be a blessing that maybe you pray on somebody as you see them. Maybe it's just helping in some way. Maybe holding the door open. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways to help other people win. And I love that, Mark. Thank you for sharing that. And it resonates with me too, because we have a slogan on our wall when we walk into our building, and it says, "Your success is our honor." And it's really that concept that we're here to serve and help and make other people successful. And it's an honor for us to do that. And it really is. It's so satisfying. Mother Teresa talked about really essentially that concept of giving to help others, and it really gives back. It comes back around for us. It's so powerful. What's really cool about your book, Mark, is that you share those three things, and then you share some additional responsibilities at the leadership level,
Right.
which I thought was solid. Like, wow, okay, you've already taken us to a point of expanding our mindset, but now you go even further. So guys, this is great. So can you share with us those other three additional responsibilities that leaders can take on?
Yeah, well, let me say a word about why we did that. We absolutely knew, based on everything we learned over a multi-year journey, that if we didn't get everyone involved, we were in trouble. The power. We've actually said it several ways. The magic is in the masses.
Mm.
The magic is in the masses, because if you've got one or two people who are pursuing mastery, that's good. And if you've got 8 or 10, that's even better. But again, let's go back to our sports analogy for just a moment. If you've got 10 people on the field that make their assignment and one that doesn't, a play can blow up. If somebody pulls left instead of right, or somebody run blocks when they're supposed to pass block, or a receiver doesn't run the route. And so we said we have to get the masses. And so that's why we said, what are those fundamentals that apply to everyone, top to bottom, top to bottom. And that's how we got the fundamentals. What we learned on the journey is that there are some additional things. Leaders aren't off the hook. We think leaders have to commit to pursue mastery,
Right.
own the numbers, and help others win. But there are some other things that leaders can do. And what we actually have gotten comfortable with the language to say these are accelerators, because you can see progress without these three, but these accelerate the journey. And so really, I'll hit them for you really quickly. They coach for life. They coach for life. This is about helping people win as human beings, not just as an employee. I was inspired by many of the companies we visited, but I'll go back to Clemson for just a minute. Clemson football. I saw a sign in their locker room. It said they have 4 goals for their team. And the first is that everybody graduate. And the second is that they leave college with skills for life. And 3 is they have a great college experience. And 4 is they win a national championship.
Yeah.
And so that's more than just a football program.
It is.
And we think leaders have a huge opportunity to, yes, coach people on execution, but when you coach them for life, what you actually do is you raise their level of engagement, which we talked about, winning the heart, which the more someone cares, the better they're going to execute. So coach for life is absolutely huge. Second is to focus on process. When things don't go the way they're supposed to go, leaders need to figure out why, which is not to fixate on what went wrong. Yes, you need to clearly identify what went wrong, but the output is generally a reflection of the process. And was it a selection issue? Was it a fit for role? Was it a training issue? Is there a physical problem in the system or process? And so when somebody doesn't, make their block, you need to figure out why. Or when somebody creates a product that's defective at the end of the line, we learned from our manufacturing friends that if you don't change the process, you're going to continue to get things that don't work at the end of the line, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So leaders have to, it's more of a root cause analysis mindset, so that you're not always reacting, but that you can respond by actually going upstream. So that's what the whole process thing is. And third is communicate tirelessly. And this was so important. We had about a 2-year running debate, maybe 3-year running debate. Was this actually one of the fundamentals?
Really?
This one is so critical. If leaders aren't talking about execution, you're going to have a hard time maintaining the focus and energy required for elite levels of execution.
Yeah.
And it's not just talking about it, but it's reinforcing it, it's rewarding it, it's establishing role models and identifying your heroes, and it's communicated in stories and in numbers and in pictures and in symbols and in on and on and on and on. Tirelessly, I think I wrote in the book, so does tirelessly mean every day? And the character in the book said, no, it's much more often than that. I mean, you don't talk about execution once a day. You may talk about execution every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Everything you do in an organizational context should ultimately contribute to execution, because execution is what you're being paid for.
Yeah.
Execution is what the customers are buying. In your case, they're buying software that does what it's supposed to do. Right? In our case, they're buying a sandwich that's hot and fresh and 2 pickles and 3 if they're small, served with a smile within a reasonable amount of time with the right condiments. That's what they're paying for. So what are you working on that doesn't contribute to that? And so if a leader will embrace this mindset, it's actually easy to talk about execution tirelessly, but you've got to be conscious, because you'll squander those opportunities on lesser messages.
And what's interesting on that, and we'll kind of go, I want to start with communicate tirelessly, because that's where we're at right now. But I want to come back to a couple of the other ones here in a minute. On communicate tirelessly, yeah, we need to do that with our team, our teammates. In fact, I think of our employees, I think of employees not as employees, but as contributors. Everybody's contributing. So we need to communicate tirelessly there. But the picture that I got when you were sharing is, you've got to communicate with your customers too. And I see that, with the Chick-Fil-A model, we see that they make sure that our order is right. They make sure, oh, are you Paul? When I come to the window and make, they're handing it to me. They want to make sure they got the order right. They're communicating tirelessly. And that means a whole lot to a customer. And I'm thinking about the 3 C's, right? Our company, those that we keep, those that we work with, those that we serve, our customers, and our community where we're at. We have to communicate within those communities. And I know for those that are listening to this, that's our opportunity. Mark's talking about elite levels of execution, and it takes place in all those 3 planes. So communicate tirelessly. And then on focus on process, I love that idea. You mentioned upstream, and I think there's a lot that we could unpack there if we had more time. But I love Toyota's concept of the 5 whys, right? So when you have that struggle and you ask the question, why? Well, there's another why. And then you get finally, after the 5th why, you probably get to the core of it. And it usually is a process issue, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
good stuff.
Yep. So my parting thought, again, you can tell I was even conflicted. I mean, I'm confessing to your entire audience. Communication is so important. I want to put one more exclamation point on it. Again, it was a coin toss at the end of the day that it wasn't the 4th fundamental. I mean, really, it is so important.
Yes.
Communication is the oxygen of execution.
Wow.
So if you want to tweet that out,
communication
is the oxygen of execution. If you're not talking about execution, the chances are you're not going to be a high-performance organization.
Yeah, that's so good, guys. Hopefully you capture that. Communication is the oxygen of execution. Mark, as we close, what's a tip or challenge that you'd like to leave our listeners with as they head off on their journey, listening to this?
Try to stay focused on execution. Now, you've got to do a lot of things to enable execution, but execution is not one more thing. We've actually encountered some leaders over the last 5 years that are going, I just don't really have time. It's like, that is the thing, right? It is the job. Whatever industry, there's whatever type of organization you're leading, execution is what you're paid to do, to execute something. And so I would just encourage leaders, never, 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 never let execution be thought of as extracurricular.
Yes.
Execution is core. And I would ask your listeners to think about how many elite organizations can they name? And I bet they can't name 10, but they interact with thousands of businesses. Well, why can't they name more? Because it's really hard.
Yeah.
So if you take it for granted, you're probably not going to achieve it. Keep the main thing, and it's about execution.
Yeah. Well said, Mark. Guys, please don't take it for granted. This is an incredible opportunity exists in front of every one of us. And we shared some great tips. Mark, thank you for that. As we close this out, any way that we can add value to you, we want to make sure that, we support you in what you're doing. So anything that you'd like for us to share with our others?
Well, goodness, thank you for the opportunity. If you want to learn more, you could pick up the book. It's been my practice for 20 years to give away any financial resources that come from book sales. So I'd love to see if this book could serve you and your organization. If you've got feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can find out more about me at tmarkmiller.com. That's pretty much all I've got for today.
Yeah, great. And you're also on Twitter as well, right?
Yes.
I think it was
at
Serve.
Leaders Serve.
At Leaders Serve. That's it. That's good. Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you so much for your time today. And this whole concept of really excelling at execution has been fantastic, and appreciate your time. Fantastic.
Paul, thank you.
Wow.
Hope you have a great day.
Wow, that was a great perspective from Mark. I really enjoyed sitting down and talking to him, and I hope you guys enjoyed that. What did you think, Mike?
I love Mark Miller, Paul, and we have so much to learn from him. I heard John Maxwell say once that culture eats everything else for lunch, right? And Chick-fil-A, definitely. I don't go to Chick-fil-A necessarily for the chicken. It's good, but I go there because I know I'm going to be treated well. And their culture just bleeds through everything that they do. So that's a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. And joining Mike and I again today in studio is Diane Kane, actually in our remote studios. It's really cool. We use this technology. We're in different locations, but we're all together here this morning, and just good to be with you all. Diane, Rick, hope you guys are doing well. So what do you all think of that interview with Mark Miller?
I think it's interesting. Culture is such a buzzword, right? You hear about culture, you hear people talking about culture, and we're going to change our culture. But it's one of those things that it's almost like, we talked on the last podcast about working out, is people say, I'm going to work out, but actually going to do something about it is a totally different ball game. And one of the things that I say when we start to talk about culture is, if you really want to find out what a company believes in, then you need to find out what they measure, right? The metrics is what they do, but their slogans are what they say. So for instance, if a company's motto is diversity and inclusion, but the number one sales guy has several harassment complaints, what they do will determine the real culture, and their people are watching. Right. So if they still have, the parking space in front for him, and they continue to promote him, or they don't say anything, then what they're saying is, as long as you produce, then you can do anything you want. Right. But if they take some sort of action to the person, then they're behaving and believing in their culture. And so that's the big thing. So I work with organizations all the time. I worked with one recently. I said, what's the culture? They said, customer service. We really want to make sure that we're there for the customer. But what they measured was the number of activities that they did for the customer, no satisfaction level of the customer, right? So I said, really what your culture is how many customers can you slam through a process, not how many customers are you taking care of culturally. And so it's really interesting that they'll say, this is our culture, this is our thing. But if you get into the metrics of what they measure, especially how they reward, that's where the true culture of the organization is.
So good, and not to, I love McDonald's, but their culture at McDonald's is different than a Chick-fil-A, right? And McDonald's had this sign for years. I don't think it's up anymore, but you guys remember it, right? Millions and millions served, right? Or whatever it was, 20 million. I remember when I came back, I used to live in Brazil. We came back and I was just like, whoa, what's McDonald's? And there was a sign that said, over 30 million people served, or something like that, right? And to your point, Rick, that's kind of accounting culture effect, right? How many
Sure.
people can we serve? How fast can we
Well,
slam
even at the
ahead?
drive-through window, right, Paul? It's how,
How
less than
fast?
2 minutes. So it's not necessarily quality of food or quality of the experience. It's pure speed and pure numbers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Big change in that. Diane, what are your thoughts on this?
And I love that you were talking about the measurements, Rick. So, for me, culture, it's the heart of the organization, right? It's the values, it's how we care about the people. And Mark talked about engagement. And so, Rick, talking about the things that we were measuring when I was working in the organizations and the organizations that I work with, one of the metrics that we were always measuring was employee engagement. For years it was, what was the satisfaction score of our employees? And when we got closer to running the survey, it was always about, okay, let's hit the target for responses. Okay, now we've got the responses, great. There was that measure that was there. And then it was really about, what's the satisfaction score? And we would do some work, and it was always moving around the dial, but whenever we were just focused on the number, it was not embedded as much. But when we started really to focus on taking care of our people and focusing on the people, which is really the engagement factor, that's when we could make sure that people were in the right seats, that we were measuring the right thing. Rick, you pushed my button because customer service is where I lived. And it was never about, when we started to talk about average speed to answer versus what was the quality of the conversation and first call resolution, that's when things had changed, focusing on the right things. So when we're talking engagement, focusing on the people is the culture. If we're not focusing on our people and caring for our people, the heart of the culture, then nothing's going to happen. But when we start to focus on those right things, then execution really does start to take care of itself.
Oh, that's so good. Mike, what are your thoughts? What is culture? Why is it important?
Yeah, I love this conversation because, when we think about breaking average, right, in the book that you recently wrote, Paul, that we released just in the last couple of months, I believe that breaking average is our culture is the ingredient for breaking average, right? In America, we've heard Paul Martinelli say many times, and I love it. In America, or in the world, I guess, we mass produce average, right?
Hmm.
And culture is what helps organizations, helps people break average, break away from the status quo, break away from, how most people do things. And when you get culture right, as Diane and Rick have already shared, you separate yourself from the pack. That's why we love Chick-fil-A, right? That's why we love Ritz-Carlton. That's why we love certain organizations that really do things differently. I think about, you brought up McDonald's, Paul. I think about Walmart. I live in the state of Arkansas where Walmart was started. And, when Sam Walton was founded it and was still alive, the culture at Walmart was fantastic. It was a family-oriented business. But over the years, they've really, I can't stand, I mean, Walmart would be the last place I would go shopping today, just because the culture is so different. It's really, there's not, you don't have that family feel anymore. It's too crowded. There's, it really is about the cheapest product, the cheapest level of staff, the cheapest way they can treat you, where the culture, they lost it. And culture is one of those things that in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, you really got to work and pay attention to this thing and keep it moving every day. So I think of it like this, Paul. Maybe you have your favorite meal, right? Maybe it's Thanksgiving dinner, but without the turkey, then it's not really Thanksgiving, right? I mean, it's that secret ingredient in that meal that really makes it a Thanksgiving dinner. So culture's like that. If it's missing, we know it, we feel it, others know it, it's felt throughout the organization, and the ability to break average is lost. So culture is everything when it comes to leadership and success, in my opinion.
And Mike, I want to dive in on that Walmart comment for a second. There was an article I read several years ago, and you can find it and Google it. It's a Fast Company article called "The Walmart You Don't Know." And it was one of the most revealing kind of behind the scenes of how Walmart's culture got there. And really, again, they essentially, to do business with Walmart, you have to open your books up and they will tell you what they're going to pay for it. And so they followed this family into Levi's plant, where Levi's actually made a deal with Walmart. They all of a sudden couldn't manufacture the goods at a certain level of profit. So they closed the plant and move it to a different country where the labor was cheaper. And so now all these people are out of the job and they're on government subsidy. And where do they end up having to shop? But where they actually, their dollar goes the furthest. So they're shopping at the very place that closed them out. Incredible article. It was profound for me to read. And I think every business person should read that article and just see how some of these decisions truly impact not only culture of the organization, but the culture of the community around them.
Right.
Yeah, man, I've got a story. My dad was self-employed, and Walmart was a big part of him. He ended up selling his business, not shutting it down, but because he couldn't compete with Walmart, because they would just drive their prices so much lower on competing product until you just can't compete with them. So yeah, I'd love to see that story, Rick, and learn more about that.
Yeah.
Paul, how about you, man?
It's fascinating. I love digging into, the details of businesses, right? I'm thinking as you guys are sharing, let's credit Walmart. Walmart serves a lot of people and they serve communities. So there's some good things about Walmart as well, but we have seen a change in the culture. The culture is not the same. The Walmart of the 80s is not, is a different culture than what we see today. But here's one, right? I was thinking about Costco. That's a pretty amazing culture. I don't know if you guys have a Costco near you. Do you guys have Costco in your area, neck of the woods?
No.
Nope.
Yeah. And there's something about it. I've been watching, I see the same employees at Costco, 10 years out, right? So we have one in town and they don't have a lot of turnover. Where if I go to Walmart, I see new people all the time. When I go to Costco, I see somebody I've seen before many times, and they're always serving. It's always about serving. And Chick-fil-A, I mean, they get it as well. I think that's what culture is reflective of. I love this topic. We could probably spend an hour just talking about culture, but let's kind of dive deeper. How do we teach and transfer culture to others? What's the secret in that? So, Rick, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we just said it there, right? Involve your team in making sure that your team understands not only the culture of the organization, but how they can execute against it. My friend Colin Ellis says that culture change either happens by revolution or evolution. And so in revolution, right, that your teams get upset, they start to swell up, and then really the only way to change the culture is to oust the leadership, right? So that's your revolution. So if you don't want to be ousted, or if you don't want to have any kind of those negative effects, then evolution is the only way to really go, which is a constant discussion involving the influencers of your team. And so really it's interesting to see how culture permeates. So for example, I remember I took over a client one time, and the whole time I was meeting with everybody, they were talking about the CIO as if he was a hermit that lived in the top of a castle that never came out. Like everything was, you got to go through me. You got to go through me. You can't talk to him. You're not allowed to send an email directly to him. And I was like, but that's the person who hired me. Like, I don't understand. And so I remember walking into his office, and I was being a little tongue in cheek, but I wouldn't look at the guy. And he's like, "What's the matter?" And I was like, "Well, you're some mythical object. Like nobody's allowed to talk to you. Nobody's allowed to say anything to you." I said, "I can't even send an email directly to you. I have to send it to one of your underbosses, essentially, and they're going to edit it and send it to you." And he goes, "I was wondering why my emails went down." He was completely unaware. And what essentially had happened is he yelled at somebody, and he had a bad day, and that permeated all the way down. That's how fast culture can change. But he was completely unaware of how the culture of his organization was working. They couldn't even talk to each other. And so by bringing him to aware, we could get into the evolution of culture, but evolution and revolution are the keys to me.
That's good. I love that take on it. How about you, Diane? What are your thoughts?
Well, I love, Paul, how you were talking about, and Rick, I was laughing because, having had that experience myself before. But Paul, as you were talking about it, and we were talking about, asking the question, how did I help someone win today? That's how we keep that there. We are normally selfish individuals, right? We're programmed to take care of ourselves first, survival of the fittest. But when we start to have that mindset of how can I help somebody else win? It's all about the team. It's more, how am I bringing that engagement to that top of mind? Helping the other person keeps it there. And Rick, to your point of all of a sudden we're sheltering this individual, we are thinking that, we think that we're bringing efficiency into the process when he really just had a bad day.
Yeah.
And staying close to your team. If he had just come out of the office, right? One of the things that I used to do with my teams every single day was something very simple. I would walk through where my team was sitting, just a quick walkthrough up and down the aisles. I see you. Good morning. How are you doing? And if I had a morning where my schedule wouldn't allow that engagement, there was immediately like, what's wrong today? What's wrong? Oh, she's angry today. How we're negatively programmed. So making sure that we're in that engagement process of just, sticking to being connected, sticking to owning if we had a bad day, and, making sure that we know that everyone is valued from that standpoint, and just modeling it every single day like we normally do.
That's great. How about you, Mike? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I love this topic, Paul. And there's the talk of culture that's theoretical, right? And then there's the how-to.
Yeah.
I want our listeners to take out a pen right now, write this website down, breakingaverageboook.com. Breakingaverageboook.com. It's the how-to, how to create a culture of breaking average in your organization. It's not some theory. I mean, you talk about what Mark Miller shared, act as one, help others win, execute with excellence. In the book, Breaking Average, Paul, there's a chapter on the collaboration factor, the trust factor. This helps our listeners. This helps leaders learn to collaborate with their teammates, with their peers, and act as one. Build trust with them. This is what we do to help others win. When people trust us, right? Then they get to win. We built the whole book around the acrostic VICTORY, VICTORY. That's about winning. And in the ownership factor, every person in the organization has to own this idea of making culture number one in the organization and executing on that every day. So, to Diane's point, and then even in the Breaking Average book, there's a chapter on the vision factor. Vision has to be clear. It has to be shared. It has to be repeated frequently. And the leader drives that. The CEO is the creator of the culture. It can't be handed off to HR. It can't be handed off to the employees. The CEO has to drive that. The values have to be created and defined. So it's not enough to just paint a picture where we want to go. What are our values that are going to get us there? Because everybody brings their own values into the organization. We have to have organizational values that keep us all on the same set of tracks. It's not enough for you to do it one way and me do it another, Paul, and we end up not getting where we want to go. And then the behaviors, how are we going to behave? How to operate every single day? How are we going to treat the customer? Maybe I can deliver good food to the customer, but if I don't do it in a way that makes them feel valued, like Chick-Fil-A does, right? We're talking about that. I mean, it makes the food taste better. Average food can taste much better when the service is better. I'm sure y'all have experienced that, right? You go to a restaurant where you get average food, but the service is so good that you don't even notice the average food, right? And that's a behavior standpoint that's modeled by every employee, and it's driven down from the CEO. And then finally, the ownership factor from the book. When the code is broken, people must be held accountable to the code. Like, we're calling people back up to that. We don't take a 2x4 and hit them over the head. We call them back up to the code. Hey, here's how we operate. That is the only way to lead and transfer culture, in my opinion, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So many great notes, guys. I hope our listeners are capturing their thoughts and capturing their notes here. And you guys are sharing a lot of great things here. And I like, with the interview that we had with Mark Miller, he talks about what the whole team should be doing, but then he takes it to another level. He says, okay, this is what everybody should be doing, these three things. And then he says, in addition to that, here's what leadership should be doing. And this all ties to culture, and it ties to what you guys are sharing. The first one I thought was really interesting was coach for life. The reality is this: leaders are stealth coaches. We don't, leaders shouldn't walk around their business saying, hey, I'm a coach per se, but they really are. It's not about what you say, it's what you do, right? Coaching others around you, listening in, understanding what their needs are. It was just like what Diane was talking about. It was a great example of that. That's a coach for life, and continuing to do that. You can be a coach for life within your business. That's how you execute. And then this idea of focus on process. Don't flip those around backwards now. Start with Coach for Life, focus on process second, right? Because there is some element to that that's important for establishing culture, maintaining culture, and building that up. I love the evolution factor that Rick was talking about. We've got to continue it, continuous improvement. That should be part of our process improvement. But the third thing, which I think is critical for leaders, is to communicate tirelessly. Just communicate. You got to continue to communicate. Mark says it comes down to communication. That's the secret weapon here for leaders is if you stop communicating, you pretty much pulled the signal. You've pulled the signal on culture. You don't want to do that. Keep the communication going. Communication creates focus, and focus is essential for elite levels of execution. And I just love that idea. So Mike has already brought up the book that we have out there, and it really does tie to this whole idea of communication and culture and building a team. It's Breaking Average, the 7 critical factors to team strong leadership. And we want to encourage you guys to go grab a copy of that and share with us your thoughts, your takes. We're continuing to look for leaders who are breaking average. And we want to know about those leaders. We want to hear about those stories of culture. So we ask you to go to the breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader. Just go to that website, breakingaveragepodcast.com/leader, and let us know about a leader. Share that story. Maybe it's a culture story that's just like, wow, Paul, Mike, Rick, Diane, you got to hear this story. We want to know about it. And we would love to hear about that leader, possibly interview them. And again, we encourage you to grab that book. So guys, I'm ready for a tip and challenge. I think it's just been a fantastic podcast, and I've really enjoyed our time together. I want to thank Rick and Diane. Before we let you go, any final thoughts that you guys want to share?
Paul, you reminded me. So I was at Bank of America for 11 years. And when you were talking about communicate, when Brian Moynihan took over as CEO, he had a really big job to do in shifting the culture. And one of the things he was a master at was making sure that he reinforced the culture and kept communicating the vision and communicating the vision and communicating the vision. And it was because that was always top of mind that he was able to make the shift in the culture there. So I think we need to put him on the list of leaders we want to talk to.
There you go. Let's do it. Can you reach out to him?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. How about you, Rick?
Yeah, I'm going back to the 2x4 comment from Mike. I think sometimes we do need to hit some of these leaders with a 2x4 to hold them accountable to culture. But it's the same thing. I get frustrated to watch culture become a buzzword versus it becoming an activism. And so I challenge anybody who starts to throw that word around, like we're going to fix the culture, we're going to change the culture. Be sure you know what you're signing up for, because it's a long haul, and that means you yourself have to change as well.
Yeah, that's so good. I learned so much from you guys. That's a great comment. I think your culture, by the way, just to add on to what you guys are sharing, your culture gets found out, right? Your culture gets found out by those. We're talking about other businesses, some that we haven't even been a part of other than being a customer. We know about their culture. It gets found out. So,
you can't
true.
hide. You can't hide.
Yeah. All right, Mike, what are your thoughts? Land us with a tip and challenge.
Yeah, I love Rick. I agree. Leaders. So when I talk about not hitting somebody with a 2x4, right? I'm talking about the employees. We just need to keep calling the employees up. But yes, leaders, we're in a place in America right now, and maybe even around the world, but I like to focus on America. We're in a place where leaders maybe need that 2x4 to wake us up. We need leaders who can break average right now. I mean, we have a huge problem in the world, and we need leaders who will step up and separate themselves from the crowd and break average in their life. And one of the ways to do that, I love what Diane shared about Brian Moynihan, the CEO she used to work with. But the tip I have for our leaders is clarity. Clarity is the key to breaking average, right? You just can't talk about, well, we're going to change the culture. We're going to change it. What does that look like? Leaders have to create that clarity, right? Where are we going? I think back to a recent mini series that maybe you watched, maybe you didn't, called The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, right? And before that final sixth championship was won. They started the season with a clear image, a clear picture of where they wanted to go, and they called it the last dance because they knew it was going to be their last season together. But they started, the leader, Phil Jackson, got Michael Jordan, obviously the ultimate basketball player, on his side. They created this idea of last dance to drive everybody toward that. They established clarity before the season began. And so the tip is create your own clarity before launching the breaking average journey, whatever that is. And then your challenge, if you're missing the mark right now, that's okay, but stop and have a real evaluation of what's getting in the way. Don't keep trying to do what you're doing. If it's not working, stop and really evaluate where you're at. Understand what's getting in the way. Ask questions of others on the team. And maybe you need to bring in a coach or consultant that can help you break average. We have a team of people that can help you do that.
Yeah, so good. Love it. Love it. So yeah, a couple of additional thoughts to what you guys just heard. Some good tips here, guys. And I would also ask that you consider just the impact of culture. Culture is about caring. If you look up the Latin word for culture, it means to care. And so ask yourself, evaluate your environment where you're at. Is it a culture of caring? Do you care for others? Do you care for colleagues? And what can you do? I mean, culture is down to responsibility, that it's not just leadership. It doesn't just start at the top. Every one of us can take that responsibility to be a better culture guy or culture gal. What can you do? Help others win. That's the challenge. And I love that challenge that Mark shared. It's asking yourself and your team this question: how are you helping others win? That's a phenomenal question. And I would take time to do that this week if I were you. Do it for yourself first, right? Maybe carry a little notebook with you and mark down, maybe hourly, maybe every few hours, just collect those moments where you're helping other people win. And then start taking notice of how others are helping other people win. And that's the beauty of this, right? It's not just about me, it's about the we. And so as you begin to take notice of how other people are breaking average and helping other people win, share that. I mean, there's nothing greater than a word of affirmation for somebody else. Like, hey, I noticed what you did over there. I noticed that impact that how you helped that customer, or how you helped that colleague. Thanks for helping them win. Because then it starts to grow. All right. Well, Mike, tell us one more thought here on our sponsor and what we're trying to do with our sponsors going forward on this podcast.
Yeah, one of the ideas behind breaking averages is we want to carry this message around the world. We don't just want it to be a conversation between us four and you, if you're listening. We want the message of breaking average to literally go around the world. And there's a quote on the front of the Breaking Average book that says, coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success. And we want to work together with you. In season 1, we were honored and certainly grateful to be sponsored by the John Maxwell team. We're deeply grateful for their support, but we're looking for other sponsors that can join us in this message of breaking average. And right now for season 2, we're open to listening to you or other people you think would be a great sponsor for the Breaking Average podcast. If you want to be featured or highlighted on this show as a sponsor, please reach out to us. You can find us on breakingaveragepodcast.com. Shoot us a message. We'd love to hear from you and discuss how we can make this a place where we work together for victory.
Fantastic. Well, Rick and Diane, thanks again. Thank you, Mike. Great conversation today, guys. Great topic on culture. Loved it. And I'm inspired by our mission of leadership and breaking average. We'll see you next time on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.